Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be fitting these wheel spacers, and in this box got something very special. This honeycomb grill. Now this isn't going to be fit today, but it will be in this video. The spacers we're going to do right now, this one we've got to get onto on a different day because time, it's winter, all that. So let's get into fitting these spacers. Ignore the state of the car, it's UK winter time, it's very dirty, but I will be cleaning it at the weekend, and I'll add a little clip in after this to show it nice and clean as well. Anyway, let's get into these spacers. So here I start to jack up the car. I'm using this little hockey puck thing because Audis, I assume Volkswagens are the same. They have these little gaps where your jacking points are on the front and rear on either side. You need these little hockey pucks basically to prevent damage to the side of the car. So I'm using that with my trolley jack. And now I start to buzz off with my impact the pre-loosened nuts. Off comes the wheel and on go the spacers. These are bolt-on spacers as opposed to bolt-through spacers. The difference is basically these ones obviously bolt on, self-explanatory. They bolt onto the hub, the wheel then bolts onto the spacers. Bolt-through spacers are slightly different. You place them on the hub, hopefully hub-centric like these ones are, makes it a lot easier. And then you put the wheel on top of the spacer and put a bolt, extended bolt, all the way through the wheel, through the spacer and onto the hub. And on goes the wheel. You'll see from the first bolt that I put through, I do it by hand the correct way, and then I result to the impact. This does end up biting me in the arse later because I do strip the threads completely out of one of the rear spacers, and it does bite me in the arse for the next time that I need to take that one off. I actually had to end up getting a tap and re-tapping out the threads in order to be able to use that again. All the bolts are then torqued to spec. And down she goes. Change of location, change of plan. Long story short, my locking wheel nuts, for the front, they were fucked. So me and Bert, which is my girlfriend's dad, we took the locking wheel nuts out and replaced them when I did the drive shaft and the front brake pads. However, the rears are still in. Rears won't come off. Long story short, we're replacing them as well. So I'm on my way to Bert's to get a helping hand, taking this wheel nut off, both rear wheel nuts off. And replacing them. So I'll catch you guys at Bert's house. The dream.
I might pull my trousers down and pull my arsehole over.
You can do it, but I'm not sure that it would be like.
Fucking brute force and ignorance.
Is that right on it?
Yeah. Alright.
Yep.
Slowly.
Yeah, we got that one. Yeah. Just popped off at the end, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's right, that's loose. Nice one. I did on the fronts, I'm pre-loosening the bolts here. It makes it a lot easier to get the wheel off when it's up in the air. This does have a parking brake, so it's not too bad. However, on cars that don't have a parking brake, it's always good practice to do this when it's on the ground. At Bert's house, we are using a bit of metal to be able to protect the tarmac. Don't want to damage Bert's drive, and up goes the car. Just like we did on the front, we're going to buzz off the bolts with the impact, take the wheel off, get the spacers ready, and on go the spacers. Again, going to buzz on these bolts initially with the impact and then use a torque wrench to tighten them to the same torque specs as we would the normal wheel bolts. But this time we have to remember we did take off the locking wheel nut, locking wheel bolt, so therefore we do need to replace that with a new bolt. Luckily, Bert did have one to hand, he had a couple of spare for me and I replaced that. We then need to move on and do the left. Now just looking at the rear, there's a huge difference on the rear. I mean, I need the front brake, parking brake to settle. Massive difference. As I mentioned in the last video, we are doing coilovers today. So I've got myself a set of brand spanking new Pro Sport coilovers. So we're going to put these on and hopefully it drops the car down a fair amount. This is a different day, however we are still at Bert's house and we need to protect the tarmac, use our hockey puck and get this car up. I get the axle stands ready as we are working off the jacks, however it's always best practice to work with the support of an axle stand. Just in case the jacks were to fail, we are still protected and still safe. Then lift the bonnet. This aids me in having access to the bolts to the top of the suspension ready for when I take it out. And the axle stands find their position underneath the car where they'll stay throughout the duration of the works. Here you see me using a socket to loosen the bolt that's at the bottom of the suspension. I quickly realised that it is a nut and a bolt and I'll need to get a spanner on the rear and use my socket on the front.
Yeah. Right. There we go.
Bert's installing two spring tensioners. These are one either side of the spring. Basically this compresses the spring and makes it easier for us to get out by making the whole assembly shorter. I go in, give it all a good bit of a wiggle and make sure there's no extra bolts that I need to undo before we start to take this suspension out. When looking at it, we realised the spring tensioners didn't give us as much room as we wanted, so we used a ratchet strap. This allowed Bert to have a bit more of a handhold later on when we pull it out, and also compress the springs a little bit more. I then undoing the bolts that are in the engine bay that are securing the top of the suspension to the car. Bert to pull the top of the suspension down and try and have a wiggle about and see how we can get the suspension out. Quickly we realised that we needed a bit more compression, so Bert uses a long screwdriver and pushes on the upper control arms to try and give us a bit more down pressure. As Bert's applying tension, he uses a tool to try and pry open the coupler at the bottom to allow the suspension to try and push itself out. I then decide to stand on the hub assembly to give us a bit more compression and a bit more room to try and push this out. After time and time again of me standing on the assembly and wiggling, pushing and struggling, it finally pops on top of the lower control arm. For the last little bit, it's a bit of a wiggle, bit of a pull, and finally it comes free. we can simply pull this out to start the disassembly in order to use the original top hat on the new suspension. As always when working on cars, nothing's ever simple. I didn't know how to take this off, but realised we needed an Allen key and a socket in order to take the bolt off the top hat, as Audis and Germans like to make things awkward. An Allen key centre to 19mm. Bit of difference in size. Why do Audi use all different sizes for everything?
That one.
From the bar. That off.
I would put that one personally.
Yeah, go on.
Because it's fucking flatter.
Yeah, go on.
I can put some nut lock on them.
They've not got room to come out in the...
They won't fucking come out, you know.
The same thing, what did I change? What else did I change? Look, when we changed the drive shaft, same thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Alright?
Yeah. Now that's all done, we just need to put everything in reverse and start the reassembly. You see me using a hammer here on the hub. This gives me a bit more leverage in order to pop the bottom of the suspension in, as I've already poked it through the top of the engine bay. After taking the old one apart, I found it so much easier to put this one back together, plus this is smaller, a bit more compact, so it's a bit easier. On go the wheels, again, buzz them on, don't hate me, and down the car goes. Bit lower than I was expecting. This is just how the coilovers came. Obviously I can't drive like that, so I do need to raise it up a little bit. This does make me think of airlift suspension though. This is after we made an adjustment and raised the suspension. As you can hear, I'm not quite happy. That's basically what it was like stock. So Let me move it off the handbrake.
What?
Off the parking brake.
Yeah, just got to move them things.
Yeah. I'll just move forward and back.
Okay.
Go.
And then,
Shut the bonnet first.
Yes.
Is there anything under there?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's about a week later. Obviously, you know by this point in the video that I didn't record the rear end. Long story short, I was dealing with time, I was dealing with daylight, and I was in a massive rush to get to my missus' work do, which I was almost in the doghouse for. So I just had to get the coilovers on. I'm on the way to the gym now, so once I finish the gym, I will park up somewhere and I will show you the finished product. After driving it for about a week, it doesn't rub the majority of the time. So normal daily driving, absolutely fine. I live down some country roads, and on some of the bumpier country roads, you do hear a very, very slight rub, but I am quite low on the rear. So I might raise the rear end 10 mil, but the front is absolutely perfect. That's exactly where I want it to sit. Enough rambling on. I'm gonna get to the gym and then I'll show you guys the car. So that's the coilovers on. As you can see, it is lower. It is dirty because I've driven it for a week, as I said, and this is English winter time. The front is sat perfectly, sat where I'd like it to be. The rear, this isn't sat quite on flat ground, so the rear isn't as low as it looks there. I'll take you around the other side and then we'll see how low it is. Like I said, the rear is quite low. Because it's not sat on flat ground, it looks a little lower, but this is where it's sat right now. As I said a minute ago, I may need to raise it just because I get a tiny little bit of rub going over some bumpy corners. But the front is where I'd like it to be. If I can get a level with the front, I think I'll be happy. I still would like to be a little tucked if I can. Just want to try and get rid of the rub and basically allow myself to have people in the back. Anyway guys, that's the coilover video. That's the install done. Hopefully you like the look of it lowered. Hopefully you agree with me, it does look a lot better. Come join us next video where this grille is going to be replaced. It is the RS grille that I'm going for. You guys obviously saw that in the previous video with the spacers. The RS grille is going to be the next thing to come on this car. Make sure you hit that. Make sure you hit the like button, whack yourself a subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what else you want to see on this car, and maybe a future project car early part of next year. We'll see what happens. Anyway guys, thanks for coming. Stick around for the next video and I'll catch you on the flip side.